we have no hoops, but we're going to talk hoops with one of the great NBA writers, a Hall of Famer, The Jordan Rules. You probably remember that book. That was like the Woj bomb of books before the Woj bombs actually happened. That was an excellent read from Sam Smith. He's got a new one out, and we're going to talk about that and some NBA with Hall of Fame writer, author, covering the Bulls and the NBA for years and years and years. The book is called There Is No Next: NBA Legends on the Legacy of Michael Jordan. And, man, Jordan hasn't played for 30-plus years, it seems like. He is still right at the top of our lexicon, Sam. We appreciate you jumping on board, and hopefully you're staying safe through these odd times we're in.
Yeah, thanks. You too, hope as well. And actually with Jordan, it's going to become – a new cottage industry, I guess, in the next couple of months. They have that 10-part series coming out. I don't know if it's ESPN or Netflix or whatever, but they came around about a year ago and, did another sequence of interviews. So I know that's probably imminent. Maybe they're even pushing it up given everything that's gone on and the lack of sports coverage.
Right. It is an ESPN one, and there's been people pressuring them to kind of get it out earlier, and ESPN has kind of said, look, it's just not ready. We're sorry. But that should be interesting as well. But, you interviewed some of the biggest names in the NBA: Bird, Magic, Phil Jackson, Reggie Miller, Isaiah, Mullen. I mean, we listed a bunch of the people you talked to, and the book is called There Is No Next. And right now there's no next game. There's nothing going on. But are you surprised at how big Michael Jordan's shadow still kind of looms over the entire NBA?
I'm not. And although, there's a whole generation of people who have never seen him play, and so that's why you'll hear a lot of Kobe Bryant is the greatest, or LeBron James now, so mostly the debate with LeBron. And probably LeBron is as great as he's been with, playing at the level this season he was playing at, have a chance to win a title again. Probably will pass, Kareem's all-time scoring mark. Probably will end up playing with his son, the first time ever that'll happen. So some extraordinary stuff. But the point, and that's sort of the point of the title, there is no next. And, you remember always when Jordan retired, it was, well, who was going to be the next, to save the NBA? It was Grant Hill. And then it was Vince Carter maybe. And then Kobe came along. LeBron, obviously. And sort of my point is there is no next, because not just because, Jordan won 6 championships and 5 MVPs and all that, and scoring 10 times scoring champion, of which is tremendous. Of course, Wilt did a lot more of that statistically, and somebody could come along, especially the way they hiked up the scores in the NBA, score more points these days. But Jordan was the unique thing, really, of the 20th century. There probably, four people who defined it, sort of a Mount Rushmore more than anybody: Babe Ruth, Muhammad Ali, Jackie Robinson, and Jordan, because they affected the society. They came along at a certain time that can't be duplicated, and hadn't happened before, won't happen again. If you look beyond basketball, Jordan had this incredible effect on society. I mean, who ever thought about paying hundreds of dollars for sneakers? And it was unheard of, certainly when we were growing up. I was growing up, certainly. And even when I remember when the Air Jordans came out, and they were, I think it was $75 or something, and I was thinking, you got to be nuts. Who's going to pay that for a sneaker, especially with a player's name on it? Who cares? And obviously it's become this incredible industry, and but also, the shaved head, the men wearing earrings, long shorts. I mean, Jordan has such an incredible impact on society. And, whereas Ali and Jackie Robinson, and I grew up in Brooklyn, were more not divisive people, but the divisive figures in the society. Michael, was a black man who drew people together, sort of be like Mike. Everybody wanted to be like Mike, as the story went. And so here was this really unique figure that transcended the game. And I think that's why, not only his effect, the Jordan brand and all that stuff still goes on, but why he remains that figure even as the decades go by and other players will surpass statistically the things he did.
Yeah, and Sam, what I find interesting, and I grew up right in the middle. I'm 43, so I was right in the middle of the Jordan, and then towards I also saw the end of it. So I've kind of lived through the heart of the Jordan and through the next era here. What I find to be interesting is, all the stories about Jordan, and more than probably anybody. But when you talk to guys who are his adversaries, Bird and Magic and Reggie and Isaiah, do you find people romanticizing about their biggest competitor or finding things that's the interesting thing to me when you talk to the greats who played against him and they look up to him as he was larger than life, even though I played on the same court with him.
One of the most honest guys I've ever dealt with, and one of the things I did with the book is I went to people, and fortunately I've been around basketball for a long time and have gotten to know a lot of these figures at a time when you could get to know them. You really can't in this era, but in the 70s and into the 80s, and I did a NBA history book, Hard Labor, on the 60s and 70s, and so back then they didn't have private aircraft. Everybody traveled together. Everybody knew. It was a very convivial sort of. Not quite like the writers riding in the trains with the baseball players and Babe Ruth, but pretty close to that. And so I went to players I knew. I happened to know Bird well. I happened to know Magic and Isaiah. I'd spent a lot of time with these guys, so they would be comfortable and be honest, with me about it. And with Bird, who again probably the most honest guy I've ever dealt with in sports. In the 86. So Jordan had broken his foot that season, came back, and goes into the playoffs against the 86 Celtics. Were probably, some consider the greatest team of all time, and certainly one of the greatest. 40-1 at home, dominated 4 Hall of Famers in the starting lineup. And Jordan scored basically playing with a lineup of nobodies. In 86, they're sort of breaking down the Bulls to sort of build them back up. And he scores 63 points in a playoff game and takes this great Celtics team to double overtime. And right after the game, Bird, who doesn't celebrate people generally, goes, this famously said, "This is God disguised as Michael Jordan." Because he had never seen anything like this, and playing against playing against Magic, playing in all these finals, playing in the era of probably the greatest players in the history of the game. Kareem still in his prime, and the 80s, Moses and Doc, and this incredible. You have 7 or 8 teams filled with Hall of Famers, and so these guys, the greatest in the game, were truly awed by what he could do. And I remember that game where, they got McHale on him, and they got Parrish on him, they got Dennis Johnson on him. They can't stop him. They're playing 2 and 3 guys. This incredible Celtics team just can't handle this one player who you don't have to guard anybody else. He's playing with Kyle Macy and Gene Banks, Dave Corzine, Sidney Green. So anyway, I think it was honest when they were looking and say, look, I know I had a great career, and then again we went to the '91 finals, and when the Bulls won for the first time, and one of the things they did was they put Jordan and Pippen, different times on Magic, and said, look, and Magic literally now has got to be dribbling the ball up backwards with his back to the court because these guys are pressuring him so much. So, and that's another thing these guys realize, the players who play. And Michael wasn't just offense; he was the whole game. He was the best offensive player and the best defensive player in the league at the same time, which is unheard of.
Sam, a quote from the book from John Paxson I thought was really interesting, where he essentially goes on in detail to say Michael Jordan understood that people and fans were coming to see him. And I just want you to talk about the impact of that at that time and the importance on how it shaped the future of the NBA.
You're right. It is a good point, and not brought up sometimes. And a lot of players, do understand it, and you see a lot of it, these days. I mean, LeBron plays to the crowd a lot too, but what John, I think, was getting at was, here was a really committed, literally, we always use the cliche of playing for 48 minutes, a guy who really did, who played that, but also understood that, that people were coming to see him play. And what resonated to me more than anything, and you don't see anymore, is we would travel around like the NBA still does, and to small cities in the preseason to play in games. And Jordan, and they would play. They had played 8 or 9 preseason games back then, so they'd play a back-to-backs and things. And so they would want to give Jordan a breather or something. And I remember coming to place. I remember one time we were in Lincoln, Nebraska, and of course, anywhere Michael Jordan's going, even though he wasn't winning championships yet, he was still a huge figure in society on David Letterman's show on Saturday Night Live. And coming to the NBA, not only the NBA coming to Lincoln, Nebraska one time ever, but Michael Jordan, and so the community's excited, and they would say, well, you can take off, you can play a few minutes. And he said, look, these people are only going to see me. They may never see me play. They may never come to an NBA game. Yes, I'm tired. And he would go out, and I remember that particular game too. He'd go out and play like 35 minutes, dunking, defending, and because he understood that it was a responsibility to the game, and the game was about the fans in the community. He never missed preseason games. It was unbelievable. It makes me so mad now. Guys don't even show up, won't even come sit on the bench a lot of times, where people pay a tremendous amount of money, and especially in places like that. So Michael not only understood a responsibility of the game, but believed in putting on a show for fans, which is, I always say about whatever, my business in a small way, yours too, but we try to inform and entertain. He understood that as good or better than anybody else in the sports, because he understood about performing and entertaining as well, and that was part of the whole package.
Michael Jordan's legacy, what was the biggest impact? Because for me, when I look at it, it's exactly what you just said, Sam. The timing of Michael Jordan, I think, is what makes his legacy. If Michael Jordan, maybe his rookie year was 2001, how different would his legacy be? It seems like the timing of Michael Jordan arriving to the NBA was everything with his legacy. I don't know if you agree or disagree, but your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, you go back, you think of like Babe Ruth. Nobody had hit, I don't even know what the record was, 30 homers or 20, whatever, and he hit 60. If you come along 40 years later, after Roger Maris had hit 60 or something, it wouldn't have mattered as much. And so, obviously a lot of people had scored, Wilt had set every scoring record. There was no scoring record that you were going to match with Wilt. But he came along in this time in society with this figure, the combination of, really attractive and personable guy, handsome. Everybody, it was funny. I was with Jordan, literally his first week in Chicago. We went. I was the beat writer for the Chicago Tribune for a long time, 30 years. And I'd gone up to Jordan's apartment. He had a little apartment in the north suburbs where the practice facility was to do a feature. And I walked in, he was ironing. And I said, what are you doing? I don't even know how to iron. You iron? And he told me, and it was serious. He had taken home ec in high school because he was so embarrassed by his looks, he felt he'd never get married. And so, he ironed and he sewed. He knew how to do all these things. And so it was just such a time in society where, like you said, the shoe fad hadn't started, and the men wearing jewelry, earrings that hadn't started, and the long shorts, and the shaved head, and so. He just came along. It's like whatever famous explorer or something. He was sort of the first one there, and also was this sort of this crossover racial figure who was a black man who was beloved, in a society that is sort of, still trying, but trying to adapt and open itself up to everybody, since the Civil War, but obviously an ongoing process. And so, yeah, the timing had a lot to do it, but you also had to produce with that. And here was somebody who produced. Every time he got to the finals, not only did he win, but he was the MVP of the finals. So, he hit the shot, the closing shot, when the game started off, North Carolina hits the winning shot for a championship, gets that first playoff run with the shot in Cleveland that's so replayed. And then, the great example of both ways. In the last shot he hits against Utah, it basically closes Bulls' career, which a lot of us like to see the end, but it was okay. Before that, he makes a steal. So he demonstrated, in effect, both sides of the game. Steals the ball from Malone, takes it full court, makes the winning shot, and so to define Michael Jordan.
Sam Smith is our guest, the author of the book, There Is No Next, NBA Legends on the Legacy of Michael Jordan. What about the guys who coached him? What was it like coaching Michael Jordan? Because in today's game, we hear so much. It's a players' league. They run everything. What was it like coaching Michael Jordan? He had some very high-profile guys coach him.
Well, it started with, in the NBA at least, he had quite a turnover to start because he started with Kevin Locker. He was a terrific player in the NBA and coached in the ABA. I think he coached the Nets to a championship before the merger. And then he had Stan Albeck for a year. And then stability started. He had Doug Collins for 3 years and obviously Phil Jackson and that partnership. But because of, I think it was a combination of, he had a very stable family, very close with his dad, who was a mentor with him, and he was very close. And then went to North Carolina with Dean Smith, and that system there of seniors first. In fact, Michael often talked about it and joked with Smith about how he excluded him from the Sports Illustrated cover picture when he was a freshman because freshmen didn't get, shouldn't get the notice, and you had to earn your way up. Up the ladder. Of course, I think Michael made the winning shot as a freshman, but so he was somebody who liked to be coached. He liked the discipline. He liked the organization, and he was a very willing. It was funny the way it worked out initially when Phil Jackson got elevated to coach, and he was bringing in. He was going to change from Doug Collins, who had more of a NBA system, and was playing Michael a lot of isolation, individual basketball, which was the style. Then that's when he averaged 37 points, and Phil coming out of the old Knicks, 70, 73 Knicks, sort of everybody could make a shot, move the ball around. Didn't believe. In fact, he had told Michael when he was still an assistant with the Bulls that only one player in history had won a title leading in scoring, and that was Kareem with the Bucks, and basically saying you can't do that. And I know Michael wasn't big on that. And then when Phil came in as head coach, and started introducing the triangle, Jordan, was sort of diminished it. He labeled it a college offense. And his point was, if I'm on the floor and Saddiel Threet's on the floor, why should we give him I'm better off shooting against two guys than he is against one. and so I remember at the beginning they started out that first year under Phil. I think they started out 1-2 or 0-3, something like that. Even though Phil was taking over a really good team from Doug Collins that had made the conference finals the year before. And I asked him about the triangle offense, and he said, well, I'll give it 3 games. But then if it's not working, I'm gone on my own. It was more of sort of a joke because, he embraced that triangle offense, and then Kobe Bryant later under Phil with the Lakers more than anybody because it was an intelligent offense. It was a thinking man's offense, and you could also build out of it what you want. So, you can involve the other players, and it really is a great offense. And it's much reviled over the years and Phil got criticized with it when he went to New York. But the equal opportunity it involves everybody in the game. At least you get a feel for the ball. You're not standing. You're not isolated. And then, you can isolate like Michael did at the end of the game. We all watch Michael Jordan. He certainly had the ball at the end, and he certainly had the ball when you needed to make a shot. So it wasn't such an offense that took away. But I think the larger point was Michael liked to be coached. He liked structure. And so he was great with coaches, and more than that, he was the leader in the clubhouse and the leader and that's what makes you a great coach too. If you've got a player who takes control of the locker room, and Michael did that.
Yes, we talk a lot about that here in Philly, Sam, with what's going on. Is the coach the right guy, and how much of a role does the coach play, and what do they mean in a game? And we've heard so much the very best teams, the best player kind of polices stuff, and the coach has a role, but it is a give and take. But I will ask you today, with what's going on in the NBA, do you have any intuition on how this might end this year?
Intuition would be all, because nobody can say. But this is what I think will happen. I think they'll come back. They've had truncated seasons before, so they know how to deal with that. They had a 50 game in lockout in '98, and then a 66 game in '11. So they've had those kind of seasons before, and they were legitimate. Turned out to legitimate champions at the end of those seasons. I think they'll come back and play some sort of a limited play. Finish off a regular season like preseason. So to get guys ready, play, 4-6 games or something. And then maybe a playoffs where you have some best of 3 to start out, maybe a best of 5. You're not going to have best of 7 series. One thing I was thinking of, and, I think that's probably come up, is and it's not going to be fans. I don't expect fans to be in the arena at any of the games whenever they finish up. I think they're going to do it because the TV contract requires a certain amount of games, and their revenue really comes primarily through that. I mean, you're losing $1 million on a home gate average, more in New York or LA, and they'll just have to give that up, and the players share that in the salary cap. And I think they'll play in effect like a studio sort of system of games. Maybe even, sort of quarantine the players during the series so that, you don't get a player who comes down with anything. Put them all in the same hotel and lock down the hotel for any other guests. And maybe in smaller places like the Bulls, they play in the United Center, and across the street is the practice facility, the Advocate Center, and maybe play the games there. A smaller environment. And so I also think there's a chance to tinker with, Adam Silver's idea. He wanted to have a midseason tournament, and maybe, depending on the time left, maybe, the playoff system, take a run at that, a bracket thing, since everybody missed out on all the betting and the NCAAs, maybe some sort of a bracket thing. But I think they'll get in pretty close to a full playoffs, and they'll play it without fans.
All right. Once again, Sam Smith, the Hall of Fame writer and beat guy for the Chicago Bulls for a long time. Now the book is called There Is No Next, NBA Legends on the Legacy of Michael Jordan. We just gave you a little glimpse of what's in that book. You can get it at Amazon.com. You can read it on your Kindle. You can download it. You can get it paperback. You can do whatever. And right now we're all looking for something to occupy our time. This right here is something that you're going to want to get into. And Sam has been kind enough to join us here for a couple of minutes on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Thanks so much, Sam.
Yeah, good to talk to you. I hope you're doing well.